Well, I'm really thrilled as always to be back here at Upaya. I certainly consider this to be one of my spiritual homes, and it always feels wonderful to be here. I've been on retreat almost all of July at a place called Maull Mountain Center in the Rocky Mountains north of here. So I've come from a retreat environment to another retreat environment, although I recently spent a few days driving across the country. But nonetheless, every time I come to Upaya, I can just feel my whole body and mind just immediately slowing down, decompressing, coming into the present moment. This place has a magical power to draw us into the present moment. So, and I've very much felt that this afternoon already, and just over the last hour, kind of sitting up by my room and looking out at the beautiful surroundings here. So I'm very happy to be here and happy to be with this wonderful community. And I'm especially thrilled to be here with Jimmy Santiago Baca, who's been a hero of mine for many, many years. And with a very close colleague named Purna Steinitz, I lead a training every year called The Event. We're getting ready to do it again in October, which is deep emotional clearing work. It's a very intense group process, and we take people deep into very stuck emotional patterns, most of which generally get imprinted in childhood, and it's a process by which people get an opportunity to free some of those up. And it can create a real window for change in their lives. And I started doing that work in prison. I invited my friend Purna to bring that work into the prison when I was there, and we did it in prison a lot. And we always read Jimmy's poetry as part of that training. It was kind of, it helped bring a transformational context into the room for the participants, and especially the prisoners who were doing that program. So, very thrilled to be here with you. So I think our title tonight is Dharma at the Edge. Is that right? Dharma at the Edge? And so why Dharma at the Edge? I was thinking about that a little bit this afternoon. Well, I think that's the only Dharma there is, as far as I know. So what's that edge? Well, it's the edge between hope and fear. It's the edge between the past and the future. It's the edge between nihilism, where we give up, nothing matters, and eternalism, where we're trying to create some kind of solid, wishful thing that we could attain and hold on to. So it's that razor's edge where we just stay with the moment and with our experience. We all know that's easier said than done, and we all know, for the most part, our culture is not structured to encourage that kind of nowness or living our lives with presence. So a lot of us, I think, find ourselves looking for that edge. I know I certainly did when I was young, and I know Jimmy did. It took me down a lot of twisted paths. I looked for that edge in sex, and drugs, and crime. I eventually became an outlaw, a drug smuggler. When I was, on a mission, smuggling, or when I was facing death, when everything was at risk, I could find that aliveness. And I had experienced it as a very young child. My world felt very magical and very alive. And at some point, when I was quite young, it kind of disappeared, and I was always looking for it. And I looked for it in a lot of dark places, and a lot of scary places. But I was determined to find my way back to something that felt alive, that felt authentic, that felt real. And the culture, that, at least the way I was experiencing it from my frame, from my cultural frame, felt dead. And so that edge. Hopefully there are many more sort of healthy and positive and constructive ways to find our way into that edge of nowness, of presence. But I think it's helpful to draw those parallels, because especially in the kind of work that Jimmy and I do, and that I know a lot of you do, we work with a lot of people who are still consciously or unconsciously trying to find their way to that edge, often in very self-destructive ways, sometimes in ways that are very destructive to others as well. So it's helpful to understand that we're all on the same path. Even though we may be engaging in much more sort of pro-social kinds of activities to try to encourage that quality of nowness in our lives, and it may seem that others are doing it in a more antisocial way, that it's very helpful, I think, if we're doing that work to realize that we're all on the same path. It's, the world is actually, and I know we all know this, but we forget it so quickly. The world is an incredibly powerful, very magical, very bright, very luminous place. And that's one of the great things about being here at Upaya, because it's pretty hard to miss that. We still can. We can wander around here, as everybody knows who lives here, and get caught up in our heads and be walking around the cloud of our concepts and our stories and all our this and that's, and we could just go through a whole day almost without even noticing this place. But it's pretty hard in a place like this to get to a whole day without noticing your surroundings. So this place is one of those magical places that tends to wake us up. But that magic is everywhere. It's in our perceptions. Our very perceptions, all the five senses, even our thoughts themselves, are all sacred. They're all made up of nowness. That's what they are. They're all luminous. They're all bright. In Buddhist terms, they're all of the nature of mind. They're all of Dharmakaya. There is absolutely no separation. When we don't see that, however, what we're drawn into is falling asleep in the midst of our conceptual overlay with life. And because there's no juice in that, there's nothing that nurtures us in that, there's nothing real or authentic in that, it draws us into a place of much more of a survival kind of mindset where we're constantly engaged in hope and fear. That somehow we can solidify our concepts of hopefulness and get through the next moment without panicking. And that's where we live most of the time. It's in our concepts and our storylines of hope and fear about our lives. So how can we bring ourselves back to that edge? Well, obviously all of the practices that we do here at Upaya are about that. Because through the practices of mindfulness and awareness, we can quiet that discursive mind a little bit and develop a little more fluidity of mind to create a little more space where we're more susceptible to waking up to the magic of the world around us, to actually letting the fresh air of nowness in. And the more that happens, the more we contact some quality of being that's who we are. It's also what our environment is. It's what reality is. But we touch it in the sense of touching it outside of ourselves, touching it inside of ourselves. And that quality always feels fundamentally good. Feels fundamentally workable. It just feels real. It feels authentic. We feel sort of plugged in. In my tradition, we simply call it basic goodness. In Buddhist terms, it's called Buddha nature, or Tathagarbha. And the more contact that we have with that, the more trust we develop that that's who we are, the less we live our lives from a place of fear, and the more we're willing to open to the nowness of life, the more we're kind of set up to open to the nowness of life. Conversely, when we're not trusting in that, then we have to engage in all of our strategies, all of our fear-based strategies, all of our hopeful strategies about how we'll get what we want or we won't get those things that we don't want, and all our fears about that we will get what we don't want or we'll never get what we want. And that's where we live our lives. So all of these mindfulness and awareness practices, but I think along with that, one thing that I find particularly helpful is really engaging our senses. Because our senses, our sense of smell, taste, touch, sight, hearing, these are direct pathways into nowness and into sacredness. And we can learn to appreciate them in new ways, whether we're out in a beautiful place in nature, like Upaya, or out in a hike around here, or whether we're in a county jail somewhere with a prisoner and we're really opening up to and tuning into that environment and hearing all the noises and feeling the steel. You know, just one moment of putting our hand on that steel bar and really feeling that cold steel bar. Not our image or our storyline about it's a jail or a prison, but just its steelness. Just that moment of touching that moment of nowness is direct access into the count of nowness, which is the Dharma, which is that edge that we're talking about. For myself, you know, I think I have this kind of a twofold path in some way. Obviously, I spent a lot of my life looking for that edge in a lot of scary places. Fortunately, for a long time, I've had a Dharma practice and wonderful teachers, and so I'm more and more able to stabilize more pro-social ways of finding my way into nowness and living more in that space of nowness and less up in my head in hope and fear. But I'm also still very pulled toward those scary places. So I go out and lead street retreats. I go to Auschwitz-Birkenau twice this year. I was in Rwanda this year leading a street retreat, and I continue to go into prisons and jails and spend time on the streets. And somehow I kind of need both of those entryways to find that edge for myself, to find that edge of aliveness, to keep waking myself up. I think our path is we just have to keep finding ways to wake ourselves up until one day we don't go back to sleep. That seems to be the path in a nutshell.